at Vedanta Ranch. We're going to be doing a landscape painting. This is a nice morning session. We've got some beautiful light here. So the focus is going to be to capture those dramatic shadows and the lighting that's just coming over the ridge. So with plein air painting, obviously we got to work pretty quickly to catch that sunlight the way we want it. So we're going to get started here. Alright, so for today's painting, I'm going to go with yellow ochre to get my composition drawn out there. Keeping the paint pretty thin in the beginning. So yellow ochre, a little bit of water in there. And again, as I said, the goal here is to get those beautiful shadows as the sun is coming over the ridge there. We have a really prominent tree up here, so I want to make sure to capture that as well. So I'm just going to get a basic composition going, kind of establishing my major shapes here. So I've got a very strong slope going down to the left. So I want to get those eucalyptus trees that are in there to kind of keep the eye from falling off the canvas pretty much. This will be my prominent tree here. More of this shape, but definitely going to come back and develop those shapes a little more as I go. We also have these really cool old ranch posts here. So let's see. Just want to get a basic design in here. There's really a lot more going on in real life. It looks really cool. They're like all broken down and interesting. So I'll get a little more specific a little later on. But that's a pretty good start. I want to start to lay in some color pretty quick here. I'm just going to go ahead and map out a few more of those little trees there. Kind of one up here as well. Alright, so I think I'm ready to get started on my sky next. So nice early morning sky. We have a lot of white with cerulean blue. I'm going to keep that paint thin to start with. Probably come back and add some texture later on. But very light. And usually when I'm doing trees, I usually come back to the sky a little later on after I start to map out my trees, because I like to work with that negative space to really adjust my shapes. So right now, just getting a color note, and especially a value note onto my canvas so I can move on to the focal area of my painting. So the sky is definitely a little bit darker as we get a little higher away from the horizon, so I just wanted to note that real quick here. There we go. Okay, so for this painting, I really love those shadows, and they are moving fast, so as the sun rises. So I want to make sure I get those established right away. I'm going to go with a purple. It's going to be Alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue, and that's it for now. I did add a little water, keep it thin. So I'm actually going to use this to start building my trees and kind of get my shadow patterns going. I really like what I got going on over here, so definitely want to get those shadows that are along my hillside first. I am really looking at my subject. I've got some beautiful shapes on this hill, so there's a lot to draw from. trees are a lot of fun to paint. They got a lot of character. Right now I'm working on that eucalyptus tree. And eucalyptus, they have, well, they're all a little different, but this one has a lot of sky gaps in there, so I'm definitely coming back to add some of that color back in later on after I get my shapes established. But as always, this is going to change quite a bit by the time I'm finished with it. I think I need to add a different color in here. So still working with shadows, but I want to push this one back a little further. This is like the trees behind the trees back there. I just wanted to change the color a little bit so that it reads so this is Alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, and some yellow ochre. But this is really going to lighten up a lot by the time I get all my layers in. But for now, I just wanted a little separation between the two shapes. Okay, so still working in shadows. I would like to start to develop the shadow shapes of my trees. So I'm adding a little Viridian into the color here. So ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson with a little touch of Viridian, just to cool down that color a little bit. Still working with big shapes for now. So this is my main tree that I want to really kind of highlight here. So it's got a really cool trunk shape, so I'm definitely taking my time and searching out all the shapes. And again, I'm going to come back with some sky and kind of touch everything up a little later, but I like that. That's working so far. So I'm pretty pleased with my shadow patterns that I've got on canvas there. I've got it noted just the way I want it before it changes. So at this point I want to go ahead and fill in those big areas of canvas with some medium tones, especially for my grassy hill here. So we're going to kind of zeroing in on those beautiful little details. Alright, so for the light part of my hill, I'm going to go with some Viridian and yellow ochre to start with, just to get a good base layer on there that's kind of close to what I see. So with oils, always working from dark to light. So this is actually a lot darker than I'm going to want the finished layer to be, but it's really good for the first layer. That way I'll be able to build up my light. Keeping the paint pretty thin still. Alright, so before I start to add all those fun details of the light coming over the ridge, I do want to map out where I'm going to put these posts. So I'm going with that Ultramarine and Alizarin again, good for shadows, and smaller brush. Let's see. So I'm not stuck with this. If I change my mind, I might choose to maybe get rid of some of these or maybe add some more. Still kind of just working through the composition here, getting everything just the way I want it. There's some really cool diagonals of ones that are kind of broken down, so don't want to forget to add those. It really kind of gets the character. That's probably good for now. I'll come back and kind of clean that up a little bit and make some more decisions later on. But now I want to get to the light and really start to develop that mood. Alright, so I've tested out some different greens here, and it looks like I'm going to go with Viridian, Cadmium Yellow Medium, and Lemon Yellow for the sunlight coming over the ridge there. And I'll probably add some other colors in later, but for now, it's really nice and bright. That's what I was looking for. So I am starting to use thicker paint as I'm doing this. So colors next to shadow are very, very vibrant, very saturated. And as you get a little further out, it starts to get a little more toned down. So I kept that color pretty strong next to the shadow, but I added a little titanium white as I'm moving further away from my shadow area. But I do want to keep some of that original color. I kind of like that rough canvas, having some of that show through underneath some of my thicker paint. So I don't want to cover everything. Definitely want to make choices about what to keep and what to add. So this color that I'm adding right now, quite a bit of it on my hillside, is Viridian, Lemon Yellow, and Titanium White. We've got some pretty cool shadows and light happening over here, so near my fence post area, so I think I need to develop that a little bit more. I'm going to stay away from that until I add those shadows in. So for my oak trees, which are most of the trees on my hillside there, I'm going to go with a slightly more muted highlight, which is the cadmium yellow with the Viridian. That way it looks like different kinds of plants. Really starting to get a lot more specific with shapes. For my eucalyptus, I'm just going to add a little more of that cadmium yellow medium in there, and that'll be pretty good for the highlight as well. eucalyptus has a lot of sunlight coming through it, so I'm definitely coming back with more sky color to kind of put into the tree hole area, but the tree overall is a lot lighter. Alright, so time to get back into my shadows a little bit here with my Ultramarine and Alizarin Crimson, and thinning out the shadows with some water. So not always, but in general, shadows, you want to keep the paint pretty thin, and then highlights you want to go with thicker paint. Kind of getting a little more specific with the colors of my shadows as well. Very warm over towards the eucalyptus area, so a little more of that alizarin crimson. I'm going to change this a little bit and just go right off the top of the canvas over here in the corner with my eucalyptus. Those trees are very tall. Alright, so I do want to get back into my foreground. I was talking about those shadows earlier, and there's some more plants and things I want to add as well. So we got some really cool coyote brush over here on the left, so I want to make sure I get that in there before I develop that area any further. There's also some shadows being cast by the poles themselves. A few more plants I would like to add over there as well. So the highlight for that coyote brush is Viridian, Cadmium yellow, and lemon yellow as well. Alright, so now that I've developed the shadows in my foreground, it's a good time to come back and maybe add some of those lighter colors that we had on the hillside earlier, and really kind of commit to some shapes here. I do want to bring some light back into my foreground to kind of bring out that really cool ranch fence that we have here. Don't want it to get too lost. Alright, so the key to these paintings, we have a lot of green here, so we really want to be a little more careful in searching out our subject and getting some nice variations going, because I do see some nice warm colors on the hillside as well, almost some purple tones. Let's see. Alright, so I've got a purple tone mixed up. In reality, we have some old grasses, maybe from last season, last spring. They're kind of dried up, and they're giving us this kind of purple tone. And it's kind of a nice complement to what we have here with all this green. I'm just trying to find the right color. Let's see what we got. It's pretty nice, actually. So, still a mixture of alizarin crimson, ultramarine blue, titanium white, this time with a little yellow ochre in there as well. But again, it just kind of helps to break up all the green with some of these warm red tones in here. Felt like it was a little too vibrant over here, so close to the edge. I want to keep the brightness kind of in my focal area, so I kind of knocked it down with some of that purple tone that we have on our brush. And I'll come back there and kind of clean that up a little bit later, but this is already feeling a little better here as far as the variety of colors. Alright, so I've developed the painting pretty far. At this point I'm really just getting into all those little different color variations. Like I mentioned, I've got a lot of green on here, so at this point I want to mix it up a little bit. I added some red and purplish tones. I'm going to go with some nice warm kind of yellow and red tones to kind of balance out all the green. And I'm trying to kind of simplify all my shapes as well, so kind of zeroing in on that finished piece right now. Alright, so these warm tones that I'm seeing are mostly in the foreground here. I want to make sure I get the right color. This is a little too muddy, I think. I'm going to go a little more pure color. So let's do some yellow ochre with white, and I'll just add a little Viridian just so it's not too far off. Let's see what that gives us. That's a little more interesting here. So again, we want something other than green. I do see this actually in real life. It is over there, so it is a nice little splash of color that we needed. And I'll be, working in this area and kind of mixing other colors into it as I go, but definitely needed that warmth there. So now that I have that in the foreground, definitely want to bring a little bit of it up, at least a little bit up my hillside, so it's not only in one spot. It doesn't really work when it's just in one spot. It just kind of makes your eye go straight there, and you're like, why is that color there? But now it's starting to feel like it belongs. So I'm going to overlap that with just a little green here and there to make it kind of feel a little more like it's at home there. There's some different mixtures going on. Alright, so I'm pretty far along with this painting. I'm kind of, like I mentioned before, I really wanted to get all my shadows in place before I worked on any details. At this point I am ready to start to work on my trees a little more. They feel very heavy. There's a lot of tree mass there. So what I like to do, you want to get the overall character of the tree, kind of block it in with big shapes, and now I'm going to go back with some sky color and put some tree holes in there. So there are a lot of little holes that I can see through the trees to the sky. I'm going to use this to kind of bring back some of that character of those shapes. But it's kind of a, you know, you go back and forth. I'm going to add the tree holes in. I'll probably need to come back and add a few more leaves and branches and things like that till I get it just the way I want it. But coming back to my focal tree here, that really cool oak tree at the top of the hill, I really like that curve that it has. So I want to make sure I capture that. It's already starting to feel a little lighter. It was very heavy before, almost ominous feeling. So just kind of lightening up the whole feeling of the painting with a little more sky. And I did decide to kind of change the shape of these earlier, so definitely going to need to come back with some clean brushes and clean paint and get my sky all touched up. But for now I want to make notes on the changes I made to the silhouette of my trees. Make sure I get rid of any extra areas like that there. I do want to make sure I take my time. I can always come back and add more tree in there, but kind of nice if you get it right the first time. So, really looking at my subject, kind of searching out my favorite shapes. So going back to my shadow colors of my trees, I just want to get a little more refined as far as my tree holes where you can see through the sky. Some of them are a little too clean. I want to add some little branches and leaves kind of poking in there. So I'm doing that right now. So I really want to pop this foreground, really make it a little more dramatic. So going a little brighter over here, really capture that sunlight. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with the color tones I have in here. There's some nice varieties. We have some nice warm tones, not all just green. But I do need to get a little more specific with those posts and kind of start to search out those shapes and the colors a little more. So I do love that purple tone that I see in this shadow. We do have some light hitting them, but really we've got most of them in shadow. So I'm going to start with the shadow and add some light as I go. Kind of picking my favorite ones. Might leave some of that original dark color that we had before, just to keep it loose, keep some variations going. I might even come back and add more shadow in later, but I love this purple that I see right now, so I wanted to make sure to get that. Okay, so that's probably enough for that purple color. I think I want to add some more of that dark purple back in. So that is same color but no white. So Ultramarine, Alizarin, Crimson. That's it. So still working with pretty thick paint now, towards the end of the painting, so really kind of getting that texture going. So I have some mustard plants that are just off frame, but I've moved them over to be a little closer to my fence here. It kind of helps to keep the composition going. So I want to have this nice vertical here. It's a little taller than my fence, and there's actually some really pretty flowers on these mustards today, so I'll add a little bit of that in there. But it just keeps the eye kind of moving through the painting, kind of coming back up and around. So I wanted to have that movement, especially in this painting with those beautiful angles that we have going. So really just searching out all these little details, kind of getting everything the way I want it. I'm pretty much putting my finishing touches on at this point. So this area is a little funny. I kind of didn't decide what I wanted to do with those boards, but I think it'll work out nicely to have it be a little bit vague right there, so that it's not all treated exactly the same. So we have some kind of lost and found edges going on there. Okay, so I have a lot of purple going on. I do like the purple, but a color that we are missing from this is that color that really makes me think of the morning shadows. So it's a little more cool in tone. So I'm going to go with a more ultramarine and Viridian. Let's see how that goes when I just mix it right into the purple. I think that'll be more, yes, that's a little more what I was looking for my trees and for my hillside shadows. Get a little more Viridian in there. So that's ultramarine and Viridian. It's really mixing well with the layers that I already have underneath here. I'm getting some nice cool tones in here. So I'm kind of simplifying everything and adjusting my colors as I go. I'm getting pretty close to finishing this as far as work on location. I might do a little more when I take it home if I feel it needs a little more definition in some areas, but most of the time I really try to finish it while I'm at the location. It's more about being here and what that feels like than anything else. I'm not sure if that little tree is helping or hurting the painting there, so I'm going to leave him there for a minute, but I might get rid of him. When I go back to clean up my sky, I could always change my mind. In order to kind of keep this shadow area simple, not too detailed, I'm really putting this, trying to like link my shapes. So I've got this shadow, it's the same color as the one that I'm using on the trees, is on my hillside. So in the areas where it makes sense, like this tree's coming all the way down to the hillside, I'm just linking those shapes together so it doesn't look so separated. So everything's kind of working together here. So coming back to that light color that I have for my trees, I want to mix it in with the color that's already on my canvas that I just put down and get some nice kind of medium tones for my trees. So that there's some soft areas too. So I've got some very hard edges and highlights, but I want there to be some soft areas. I'm getting a light color to get those highlights on my post here. Let's see if this shows up enough. It's kind of close to the color of the plants, so I'm going to put a little more yellow ochre into that mix. So I've got titanium white, yellow ochre and a little bit of cerulean blue, but I definitely want it to stand out from the plants. So I'm going a little more saturated in color, a little less titanium to really give it that extra pop. There's really not a whole lot of this highlight on these posts from the angle, the way the angle of the sun is, but it is a nice little splash of color here. So adding those little mustard flowers in there, I don't want to overdo this, but I think I want a little bit more, maybe over here. So these flowers are kind of a little treat for the viewer, so I really don't want to overdo it, otherwise they're just kind of everywhere. It doesn't make them quite as special, but I do love flowers, so I think that's working. I think I'm going to leave it there, considering putting just a little bit over on the left as well. Let's see what that looks like. Alright, so I feel that I've captured the mood of what I was going for when I set up to paint this scene. I'm really pleased with all the shadows and the composition I feel is working. At this point I feel like I have enough information on canvas to bring it home to the studio. I feel like I'm going to leave everything pretty much the same. I do want to go back to the sky and just kind of clean it up a little bit. But overall very pleased. So I hope you guys enjoyed painting with me at the ranch today, and I will see you all next time.